Okay, Donna. Let's go.
Welcome to the pod, folks. I'm your host, Sophia Mella, and this is a special episode, A Place in the Woods Where Paths Cross. This is Night Blooming Jasmine, but it's also Body Language, my other podcast, and the reason for the meeting above the convenience store is because today I'm talking about Fire Walk With Me, the cult classic prequel to Twin Peaks from 1992. If you're listening on the Night Blooming Jasmine feed, let me illuminate you. Body Language, formerly This Body Podcast, is where I talk about my interests, my trivial pursuits, what's going down, my life in Los Angeles, musings from my vantage point here in Los Feliz about love, culture, music, politics, all the tragedy and comedy of these crazy times. There's a series on the Black Dahlia murder, episodes on the early history of porn, a dive into yoga ethics. There are music shows, all sorts. Some of it is available for free, but most of my content is behind the paywall on Patreon and Substack. Most recently, I wrote about my love-hate relationship with Bret Easton Ellis and the impact the Shards had on me. Now a dicey TV show directed by huckster Ryan Murphy. Anyway, subscribe to Body Language with me, Sophia, for free in all the places, and check out the Patreon if that sounds like your kind of thing. I'll put all the links in the show notes if you like to read. There is also Substack. So, right now, on Body Language, I'm traveling back to the 90s to the cult section of the video store, renting a movie that looms large in my teen memory and seeing what I can glean from it now, in my 40s. The times, they have changed, and I want to see if these influences hold up or fall down with the passage of time. I started with Drugstore Cowboy from Gus Van Sant, and then followed up with the weird heroin movie from Jane's Addiction, Gift. If you know, you know. And whenever I do a David Lynch movie, I'm going to cross-post it here to the Night Blooming Jasmine feed, just in case I can entice you to the other side. On Fridays, more or less weekly, I try to put out a newsletter with my current obsession and 2 songs of the week. So 1 obsession, 2 songs. I recently wrote about the Philosophical Research Society, so check that out on Substack. Link in the show notes. The Philosophical Research Society is really the definition of a place both wonderful and strange, so do not miss. So, initially, I wanted to get Lost Highway out from the cult section of the 90s video store, but it is so hot here in LA right now. We are heat waving, and you know, I needed to start my Lynch inquiry with something that I'm more familiar with. I've seen Lost Highway only twice, once when it came out in the movies, and then last year when I watched it during my lost year in the desert, post-fire apocalypse in LA, and I thought it was fucking amazing. I have thoughts. I have many thoughts, but I also feel like it's such a mire that I need to get my footing in the feature-length Lynch landscape with a film that I am most familiar with, and that is Fire Walk With Me. I've seen this movie about 450 times, so let's go back.
See, I've already gone places. I just want to stay where I am.
When this movie hit theaters in my neck of the woods, it was 1993. Things came out in New Zealand a year after the US, and I was 14. I saw it at the Rialto Theatre in Newmarket, Auckland, with my best friend and fellow Twin Peaks head, Laura. Yep, Laura. We are still besties to this day, but we're not 14 anymore. We're 47. Crazy. We used to go to all the art house releases. I remember seeing Nadia there too, the vampire movie produced and fully financed by David Lynch and Mary Sweeney. And I think I saw that with Laura as well. We were obsessed with movies. There was no internet. We got out and about back in those days, getting around on the bus. Life really revolved around the movie listings in the newspaper. You'd find out what was playing, figure out how to get there, and go. And it was a rich time for experimental stuff, though I know critics saw Fire Walk with Me at Cannes and hissed. How rude. How very, very rude, if you ask me. Who could be so crass? Regional critics? The French? I remember coming out of Fire Walk with Me feeling really shocked and disturbed. It was not what I had expected, but I thought it was really something deeply impactful. David Bowie, Chris Isaak, Moira Kelly as Donna instead of Lara Flynn Boyle, and a walking, talking, very much alive Laura Palmer. The horrifying death scene at the end, so violent and terrible and sad. We wandered out of there with much to mull over. It had not been funny like Twin Peaks, the TV show. I mean, there's a weird humour, but it wasn't really quirky for the sake of folksy small-town laughs. It was camp in some ways, vivid, tragic, and it explained a lot and raised new questions. One thing I'll say for 14-year-old girls, they understand certain things. I was entirely comfortable letting this movie just wash over me. Maybe because at that age you know that you don't know a lot of stuff, you're absorbing everything, metabolizing it, deciding what parts of yourself fit the archetypes being laid out in front of you.
What does Bob say?
He says he wants to be me or he'll kill me.
No.
Yes! Yes!
What? What?
Fire. Walk with me.
Laura Palmer was a girl that we had known since we were 9. We'd read her diary when she started writing at 10. Thank you, Jennifer Lynch. And finished when she died at 16. We had a kinship with her. And we were in a growth phase ourselves, trying on different personas and traits and figuring out what kind of women we might become. Maybe that's why, despite being deeply disturbed by the movie and feeling scared catching the bus home after dark, we held this deep reverence for its creation and for the voice of David Lynch, even if we couldn't articulate all the moving parts. I felt like I understood. And the assignment really is to just let it dream you. So I've seen this movie over and over. I own it on DVD somewhere in a desert storage unit. My copy is signed by Chris Isaak. I presented it to him after one of his shows in New Zealand when you were supposed to buy one of his posters. When I put the DVD on the table in front of him, he looked up at me. He was wearing lots of makeup, I remember that, and he said, "Thanks for making me look cool." You're welcome, Agent Jasmine. Some of these Twin Peaks men do need some help being cool. You know who I'm talking about. Just because someone says it doesn't make it true. Agent Chester Desmond was not cool, and by the time I saw Chris Isaak in concert, he was more Liberace than Dick Dale. This must have been around 2005, so it was past the Wicked Game era and the height of his sexiness. He'd really settled into the lounge act kind of surf guitar thing, very polished. A really fantastic show, actually. I would go again for sure. But, you know, I think most artists who work with David Lynch experience their finest moments career-wise. Not all. Obviously, David Bowie was a force from out of space. God, if both Bowie and Lynch were alive today, I would be on all fours begging for the Two Davids podcast. Can you imagine? But like Balthazar Getty, Justin Theroux, Laura Haring, Billy Ray Cyrus, Mädchen Amick, Sherilyn Fenn, Lara Flynn Boyle, there are so many actors who reach soaring heights under David Lynch and David Lynch only. Controversial opinion. Naomi Watts in particular springs to mind as someone who can act her way out of a paper bag with the right director. But like, she's never got the right director. Not since Mulholland Drive. I guess The Return. Naomi as Jackie O in Ryan Murphy's love story was, in my opinion, a ridiculous role. Ryan Murphy, it's not David Lynch, and he does so much less with so much more. Naomi is also in the bland and nonsensical Ryan Murphy-Kim Kardashian vehicle All's Fair. Despite having this superstellar cast, Naomi, Glenn Close, Sarah Paulson, Niecy Nash, all of these people propping up Kim Kardashian, who, truth be told, isn't a bad study. The finished product was a pile of expensive codswallop, like really, really bad. Naomi's career, it's my pet peeve. Like, why? Why, Naomi? She was so epic as Janie E. She was in Mulholland Drive, for Christ's sakes. Other than these roles, all big belly flops, my opinion. Actors, what are they like anyway? But this is one of the things that Lynch understood. David Lynch knew how to pick the right vessels for his visions. He liked to work with the same core people. Jack Nance, the marvellous Laura Dern, the great Grace Zabriskie, oh my God. And our Laura Palmer, the one and only Cheryl Lee. Cheryl Lee in Fire Walk With Me. Give this woman a retrospective Oscar. This fucking performance. I'm gagged. Cheryl Lee as Laura Palmer, hands down, one of the most important roles in the history of cinema, and she fucking killed it. Literally. Likewise, Grace Zabriskie as Sarah Palmer. Oscar. Such insane performances. It must come from a dream. So I looked at some custom reviews of this film on Amazon. It's rated 4.6 out of 5, but me, being the dark soul that I am, I clicked on the 1-star reviews, and I saw this. Stephen Landis from the United States of America says, not for fans of Twin Peaks. Fire Walk With Me is not a movie intended for fans of Twin Peaks, the series. It offers no closure, no story development, and none of the quirky charms of the series. Stephen, if not for fans of Twin Peaks, then for whom? No new story development? No closure? Get a fucking grip. Dak Dakota, also from the United States, said Bobby's profuse use of the F word was unnecessary. Fuck you, Dak Dakota. Larry Gott, another American, review as follows. Awful, dreadful, terrible, horrible, boring, stupid, disappointing. Larry, I'm sure you're doing great. Anyway, the hostility towards this movie wasn't just coming from Amazon reviewers who apparently expected Bobby Briggs to speak like Mr. Rogers. The film was genuinely hated when it came out. At Cannes in 1992, where it premiered in competition, the reception was notoriously hostile. Hissing, booing, hoots. Roger Ebert called the film shockingly bad.
How you doing, Roger?
Janet Maslin in the New York Times called it disastrous and pathologically unpleasant. And then there was Vincent Canby. Vincent Canby, the chief film critic of the New York Times, wrote one of the great all-time hate reviews of a David Lynch movie. He basically said it wasn't the worst movie ever made. It just seemed to be. He died in 2000, so he never got to review Mulholland Drive, which is too bad for him because Mulholland Drive would go on to become one of the films most frequently described as the greatest film ever made. are to be a critic. Such bottom-feeding antagonists. Necessary, though. Especially now, because reading Amazon reviews from Joe Blogs in Middle America is not the same thing as reading an informed, intelligent review from someone who does it for a living. Anyway, the really interesting question isn't whether the critics were right or wrong, it's what did they think that they were watching? The hostility is strange. The film looks beautiful, frame by frame, gorgeous. Cheryl Lee, she's the GOAT. But the reception to Fire Walk With Me was so horrible that it certainly wasn't in consideration for an Oscar. Looking back at the year's contenders, we have The Silence of the Lambs, which won, Beauty and the Beast, which I've completely forgotten or never noticed, Bugsy, JFK, and The Prince of Tides. Some American stories are glorious ones. A movie about JFK is an obvious example. But what about Silence of the Lambs by Jonathan Demme? On paper, the two films have a lot in common. FBI agents, murder, sexual violence, the hidden rot underneath ordinary American life, and a distinctly American nightmare. And The Silence of the Lambs is a terrifying movie. It's about a couple of horrific serial killers. Very dark material. So why did the public and the Academy reward this film and absolutely hate Fire Walk With Me? Demme did a sublime job on The Silence of the Lambs. It's beautiful, controlled, comprehensible, and the audience can connect to the emotional core easily because it's a classical Hollywood thriller. Demme gives the audience a story they can follow, a protagonist that they can identify with, a goal, escalating obstacles, clues, the villain, and ultimately a resolution. Clarice Starling enters the film as a young FBI trainee, and we immediately understand who she is, what she wants, what she's afraid of, and what she has to do. It's about investigating the darkness and resolving it. The FBI is an institution backing Clarice, and she comes out of the dark. Fire Walk With Me says something else entirely. There may be no way out. Laura Palmer isn't investigating the darkness. She lives there. And the institutions around her don't save her. Her father is the monster. Her friends don't understand what's happening. The police arrive too late. The adults don't care. Even the supernatural world doesn't function according to a reassuring moral order. That's a much harder movie for a mainstream audience to metabolize. And I think this is the key difference. The Silence of the Lambs lets us identify the monster. Fire Walk With Me asks us to understand what it feels like to live with one. Hannibal Lecter is an extraordinary monster. He's fascinating precisely because he's outside normal society. He is an intellectual predator. He's imprisoned. He's recognizable as a criminal. So the audience can say, that man is evil. But Fire Walk With Me makes the evil so much more uncomfortable. Leland is not some gothic monster living in a dungeon. He's a father, married, respected, lives in a nice house. He dances with his daughter. He goes to work. He participates in ordinary American life. That's much closer to the actual horror of abuse. And Lynch refuses to make Leland into a simple supernatural villain. He's simultaneously perpetrator, victim, human being, monster, and psychologically fractured person. The movie doesn't let us put him safely on the other side of a line and say, there, that man is evil. Because the evil is inside the house. So, I have to say right here, I'm reading a book called We Tell Ourselves Stories, Joan Didion and the Dream Machine, about how film impacted Didion's writing, and that famous saying, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. What she was saying there is not the inspirational quote version of Joan Didion that you see floating around. She's actually talking about the way life's events don't have a satisfying storyline. We're always looking for a reason. We look for morals. We look for something that makes stuff make sense. We tell ourselves stories because reality, it's just a jumble of images and events, and we have to impose a narrative line on top of it so that we can live with what happened. There is no arc. There isn't reassurance that things happen for a reason. Things don't work out the way they're supposed to. There isn't even a supposed to. There's just the eternal present and the phantasmagoria of our experience. Didion wrote about the center not holding, about the way the social structures and shared assumptions that are supposed to make reality intelligible can begin to fragment, leaving you in a void of total confusion. And Lynch was gifted at showing that phantasmagoria in film. He obviously doesn't impose really explicit narrative lines on images. We instead get to live inside of a dream. That shall be the whole of the law. And I think that's one reason Fire Walk With Me was so difficult for people to metabolize. Because Twin Peaks itself had given us a story about Laura Palmer. It had given us a mystery. Dead girl, killer, clues, secrets and suspects, and eventually an explanation. But Fire Walk With Me just rips that apart. Mark Frost, who was David Lynch's partner on the series, was not involved in Fire Walk With Me in the way that he was with the TV show. The film was written by Lynch and Robert Engels, and Lynch directed it. Frost's particular interest in Jungian psychology, mythology, and legends that had helped shape Twin Peaks wasn't there. This film was much more naked Lynch. The stories we tell ourselves in order to live. Then the story falls apart. The center does not hold. There is no satisfying story for Laura. Do audiences actually want that in a movie? Or do we want the darkness to have a shape that we can recognize? A shape in the darkness that we can discern? A villain, a victim, a detective, a clue, a solution. Something that allows us to leave the theater and say, okay, now I understand. I think a lot of the negative reviews came from people who liked the kooky series and simply couldn't reconcile it with this pitch dark depiction of Laura's last week on Earth. They wanted Lucy comically transferring calls at the sheriff's station. They wanted the quirky small town charm. Instead, David Lynch gave them sexual abuse, drug addiction, prostitution, murder, dissociation, and a teenage girl whose entire world is collapsing around her. In the series, Laura was dead. Her life investigated, inferences made, theories were expounded upon, but the focus was on all the other characters, and it was television. Fire Walk With Me. How would you make a kooky, quirky, weird melodrama about the sexual abuse and murder of a teenage girl who was addicted to drugs, doing sex work on the side while dissociating to the point where she didn't know that her own father was raping her? Not very funny, is it? Her killer has done it before, and he will do it again. So let's start the movie. We open on a TV being smashed, which is probably the clearest message sent throughout this entire film. This is not TV. Fuck TV. Fire Walk With Me begins with the investigation into the murder of Laura Palmer's friend, Teresa Banks, and takes place 1 year before the final days of Laura's life. And Lynch begins the movie by denying the audience what they are expecting. Dale Cooper, Twin Peaks, the familiar faces. Instead, we get a dead girl named Teresa, 2 FBI agents we've never met, a hostile little town called Deer Meadow, and an atmosphere that feels cold and completely unfriendly. He's essentially saying, we're not even going to give you the comforting familiarity of Twin Peaks yet. The television series had trained us to expect a certain kind of darkness. It could be surreal, bizarre, but it was also cozy. You could be in on the joke.
Tailored dresses are code for drugs.
Oh.
You notice what was pinned to it?
A blue rose?
Good. But I can't tell you about can't.
Fire Walk With Me does not let you be in on the joke. It wants you to look directly at what this joking was covering. David Lynch became more and more fascinated by Laura, resurrecting her in Fire Walk With Me because she was more interesting alive than dead. In the series, she's the mystery around which everyone else organizes themselves. In Fire Walk With Me, she gets to be the person. That distinction makes me wonder about the initial bad reception. What is a girl allowed to be? Dead or alive? Lynch has always talked about loving Laura and about wanting to see that last week of her life. Cheryl Lee, who had originally been hired to play a dead girl, became the person who could actually give Laura that life. Lynch himself said he was amazed by what she was able to do in the role. Same. And I think you can feel that love in the movie. Laura is not an innocent. She is not particularly easy to like. She's weird. She manipulates people. She can be cruel. She's a teenager. A teenager who's trying to figure out what the fuck is happening to her. The film refuses to reduce her, but Lynch gives her back her contradictions. And Cheryl Lee gives her back her body. Her body is constantly telling us things about Laura. The way her face changes, the way her hands move. She lights cigarettes, dances, laughs, recoils, dissociates. She screams. She tries to get away. Sometimes she doesn't. This is one of the things that feels different to me at 47 than it did at 14. At 14, I was fascinated by the darkness. I thought it was cool, the aesthetics, the power dynamics. I was fascinated by the seedy underbelly of sex and drugs and power. Now, I'm well aware of the costs associated. I'm not saying I've done a full turnaround and now take my kids to church in a minivan on Sundays. I obviously still like what I liked. My personal tastes didn't resolve neatly into something more middle of the road or whatever. The movie hasn't changed. I have changed. How can you not know better after 30 years of lived experience? And I think that's also why the relationship between Laura and Donna hits me differently now. Donna represents something. She's still close enough to innocence, and she's furious about it. When Donna enters the pink room, Laura is watching something sacred be dragged into the world that's already consumed her. Later, Donna asks, "Why do you do it?" Laura doesn't answer. And then Leland walks in. He's the embodied answer as to why. And this is why I think the movie is so much more complicated than a story about a bad girl, because it's like not a cautionary tale. She isn't... It's not saying, look what happens when a nice girl makes bad choices. No. She's a person whose choices have been shaped by forces that she is desperately trying to understand. She's still a child. And still, she makes choices. That's important because she has agency. She demands it. That's what makes her final movement so powerful. She knows. By the end, she knows. She knows who Bob is. She knows who her father is. She knows what happened to Teresa and what's going to happen to her, what's coming. Now, the truth is horrific, but Laura chooses to face it. And this is where I start thinking about Fire Walk With Me as a spiritual redemption story. Not because Laura escapes death. She doesn't. It's not because everything happens for a reason. It doesn't. I think the spiritual triumph is something stranger. Laura refuses to surrender herself. She goes into the darkness. She experiences it, sees it. She's not absorbed by it. She doesn't become it. It's different. Ronette goes into that darkness with her, and in this magical moment, her angel appears and she gets out. Laura doesn't get out, but Laura gets her angel. The film ends with this extraordinary image of Laura in the red room with her angel appearing to her. And whatever exactly the mechanics of the Twin Peaks mythology are, whatever the lodges, whatever the angels are, whatever Bob is, Judy, etc., emotionally, something very clear has happened. Laura is finally seen. She's not being investigated, not speculated about, not a mystery. She's seen. And it's grace. I've always found the binaries of light and dark, good and evil fascinating in Lynch. He uses them as a storytelling device, or so I thought. But now, I think it might be something different. Because look at what happened to Fire Walk with Me. It was accused of being one of the worst films ever made. And then over decades, the film was rehabilitated in the public eye and is now widely regarded as one of Lynch's great works. Lynch himself later said that he loved the film despite the disastrous reception and was really hurt by that, as you would be. Really horrible to have your film booed and hissed at. I mean, for fuck's sake. There have been some bad films that deserve to be hissed at, but a David Lynch film? Show some respect. You have to wonder, how black and white is anything really? How stupid are our judgments? How much of what we call good or bad is simply the story we're telling about ourselves, about something at a particular moment? Well, it certainly gets the people going. I guess people weren't entertained by Fire Walk with Me when it came out. What is entertaining about incest? And it is a slog. I thought to myself upon this rewatch, an intermission would not go amiss here. A little bit of a break from this claustrophobia, but that's the whole point. There is no break. Something else has changed over time. Online now, there is a whole community of people who experience childhood sexual abuse and incest who recognize themselves in Laura's sisters. They see her. They empathize with her. Some of them feel represented by her. What a legacy. Laura isn't a symbol. She's not an aesthetic. She's not David Lynch's beautiful, tragic, blonde girl. For some people, she's the closest thing they have to seeing their own experience represented on screen. And I think that is the film's spiritual triumph too. Not that Laura is saved, but that she is not alone. People found her, they continue to find her. And now I want to go back to something I said when I was talking about seeing this movie at 14. I think they said 14-year-old girls understand certain things. This is true. This is in our DNA. We don't need to live through certain things to have a biological memory of the terror of the women that came before us. That's why girls understand certain things. When I saw Laura, I thought, I get it. I couldn't have explained why. I hadn't experienced the things that Laura had experienced. I didn't actually know what I was looking at. I was just absorbing it, metabolizing it, trying on the archetypes. And now I'm 47. I've lived another 33 years. I've had relationships. I've watched my friends change. I've watched culture change, observed the way women are looked at, talked about. I've thought a lot about the male gaze. I've thought a lot about bodies and sexuality, about power and shame, about the things women know without necessarily having language for them. Fire Walk with Me resonates more and more over time for me. Truths reveal themselves over decades. You don't necessarily see the whole artwork all at once. So in that way, David Lynch was an oracle for that 14-year-old me. I suspect that there will be more to come as the years roll by, if I'm fortunate enough to have them. And so, as we draw to a close, it's time to measure this 90s cult film by the body language metric, the truth and beauty test. With this particular movie, the truth and beauty test takes on many faces and metaphors. It's heavy. Because throughout the film, Laura is seeking truth in the pits of hell. She's struggling so hard for it. And she knows that even if the truth is horrific beyond measure, the jewel of truth is so beautiful that it will set you free. She doesn't succumb to evil. She goes to the place where evil lives. She looks directly at it. She still has a soul. Ronette goes to the pits with her, and in a vacuum is all of a sudden freed. She walks away. Pure grace. And Laura walks into the final mystery. Her death, her life, her transition as a spiritual triumph. Fire walk with me. 2 thumbs up. Fuck you, Roger.
I would like to say goodnight to all you beautiful viewers, and get all cozy now and have a beautiful sleep with sweet dreams. And sometimes when you are falling asleep, going from the waking state of consciousness to sleep state, sometimes we experience this gap in between waking and sleeping. And this is a place where people transcend and experience unboundedness, sometimes a blast of white light, a very blissful feeling. Maybe this will happen to you this evening. You can't force it to happen, but with Transcendental Meditation, it happens each time you dive within. So again, just get yourself in a good, comfortable position. Have a beautiful sleep with very sweet dreams. Thank you very much. Is it okay?